Behind me is the Toyota Mirai. Now this is a second generation car. The first generation Mirai came to Australia in limited numbers as part of a pilot program, and this second generation model furthers that. Why can't you buy one yet? Well, it's a fuel cell electric vehicle, or an FCEV. What does that mean? It means it's essentially an electric car that you can drive around for up to 650 kilometres and not have to plug in at night. Instead, you can refuel it in 5 minutes like you would a normal petrol car. Toyota thinks this is the way of the future, and we're going to take a drive to find out what it's like. Before jumping behind the wheel, what is it that makes an FCEV different from other cars on the road? Well, the Mirai is an electric vehicle, so like other EVs, that means there's no combustion engine, no noise and vibration, just smooth, quiet running. What's different in this case is rather than a large, heavy battery providing the long-range ability, the Mirai generates its electricity on the go. It does that thanks to what's known as a hydrogen fuel cell under the bonnet, a system that takes stored hydrogen gas and combines it with oxygen as a means of generating electrical energy. The chemical reaction of combining the two elements generates an electrical charge which is used to power the motor, and the only byproduct from the car itself is water vapour. There's a battery on board too, but it's much smaller than a normal EV battery. It has more in common with the batteries in Toyota hybrids. It holds a small buffer of energy to help out under peak load. The interior design is made up of plenty of familiar Toyota elements. The dash has a C-shaped flow that's a lot like what you'll find in the Supra. There's a huge 12.3-inch infotainment screen, lots of metal look and gloss black finishes, and a decent haul of standard equipment. Powered front seats, dual zone climate control, keyless entry and start, 14-speaker JBL audio, and a full list of Toyota Safety Sense driver assist features are loaded in as standard. There's no options or upgrades though. What you see is what you get in Australia, unlike what's available in the USA. The leather trim is all faux leather, and some of the more extravagant wood trim and ambient lighting options in same-size prestige sedans aren't found here. While Toyota has put the Mirai forward as a premium sedan, it's somewhere between mainstream and prestige. Anything that isn't properly premium is made up for by the powertrain. One of the requests Toyota says it got between the first and second generation cars was more space. Customers wanted to be able to put 5 people in the car. So as a result, the new platform allows that, and this car is big. It's roughly the same size as a Mercedes-Benz E-Class, and it sits on an identical wheelbase, but it worked. There's plenty of legroom, decent enough headroom. 4 definitely fit, but 5 might be a pinch. One of the hydrogen tanks is directly under the floor, so it makes the centre tunnel pretty high. But other than that, this is a genuinely premium interior. There's another 2 hydrogen tanks under the car further back as well. The Mirai can hold 5.6 kilograms of hydrogen, which might not sound like much, but that's the equivalent of around 141 litres, almost double the fuel capacity of a regular car. The battery pack lives behind the rear seat too, so boot space suffers as a result. There's 272 litres back there. That's basically the same as what you get in a Yaris hatch, and smaller than the boot in some versions of the Corolla hatch. In terms of what it's like to drive, it's actually very impressive. Possibly the best thing to compare it against is the previous generation Mirai, and Toyota's had those on hands for us to drive as well. That car, it is a generation older, but it's also not like this car. It's front wheel drive. It's kind of more closely related to previous generation Prius and RAV4 and cars like that. And it definitely feels like cars like that to drive. The suspension isn't quite as good. The steering isn't dialed in. The ride comfort is, again, not bad, just not great. This is premium. It's quiet, it's insulated, it accelerates smoothly, the steering feels nice, the ride is nice. Everything about it is a premium car, so it's pretty obvious to see why Toyota has done what they've done in terms of using this platform and giving the car some refinement and some niceties to go with its position in life. If you get the idea that
Toyota maybe had Tesla in mind, I think you're headed somewhere. That seems to be who they're going after with this car. They're never going to admit that. They're never going to say this is our Model S rival, and in a lot of ways it isn't.
Certainly, from a styling perspective, the new Mirai and its sleeker sedan profile are in line with what brands like Tesla and Lucid are doing. In places like California, where image counts and zero emissions motoring is a big market, it makes sense to ditch the sci-fi weirdness of the previous car.
We haven't spent a whole heap of time with this car. Literally, Toyota's given us a couple of 5-minute laps around the block, and we're doing that in Altona, Toyota's home ground, basically. So there's no real conclusions to draw here. I can't tell you if it meets its 650 kilometre claimed range. I can't tell you what it's like on the freeway. We haven't done that. There's a test track at Toyota and we got to take it up to 100 kilometres an hour. Not against the stopwatch, but it feels great up to 60 kilometres an hour, and then it starts to lose out a little bit. Now, largely that's most to do with the fact that this car has 300 Newton meters and is rear-wheel drive. Look at the current crop of EVs and they have double that or more in terms of torque output and double that in terms of driven axles. So there's a lot more performance potential available in some EVs that this car maybe doesn't live up to, and it maybe doesn't have to. I don't think that's an issue for it. It doesn't have a price either, so it's hard to say if it's good value. Right now, while it's still in sort of pilot program phase, the companies that are eligible to lease one off Toyota can do so at about $63,000 over 3 years. That's not outlandish, but it's not cheap, and at the end of it, there's nothing left. The car gets handed back, and that's all there is to it. Toyota's not saying how much of that cost they're wearing either. This isn't a $63,000 car, it has to be more than that. This is a proof of concept. This has all those things that people like about EVs. It's really quiet. It's really smooth. Every so often you hear, I'm not too sure what, some pumping or some fan noise or a pressure release valve from the hydrogen system as it channels fuel into the fuel cell. But other than that, it doesn't rev up, it doesn't roar, it doesn't shunt as it shifts gears. It's a single speed transmission in the same way that an EV is. They're all the things that people like about EVs. It does that solid surge of acceleration from standstill, which people like about EVs. And then it does it with 5-minute refill times, which people like about petrol cars. It means that if you had to, you could drive from one end of the country to the other. You could stop for a coffee or a sandwich, fill up and be back on the road without waiting for someone to free up a charging station, without waiting for a fast charge fill, and without necessarily having to plan your charge stops. That is, of course, conditional. Right now, there isn't actually a refueling infrastructure for cars like this. There is one coming, but that will take time. Let us know in the comments what you think of the Toyota Mirai or fuel cell vehicles in general. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell to stay up to date. And for a full review of this car and heaps more, you can check out CarAdvice.com.